Wealth can carry a hefty price tag. At least a couple of types of wealth can. Income wealth and status wealth, which we all too often conclude are the measurements of a wealthy person, but they require personal sacrifice. You don't become the CEO of a listed company earning a six-figure salary and an eye-watering annual bonus without giving the role a significant part of your life, and that can have health consequences. A few years back, I had the pleasure of interviewing Tom Blomfield for our podcast, Informed Choice Radio. Tom is co-founder of the challenger bank Monzo, and when we spoke back in October 2016, he was a 30-year-old tech entrepreneur, the darling of the London fintech scene, and he was achieving great things. I remember the morning we spoke making the call that had been pre-arranged by his PR team with a strict instruction that he was a very busy chap and we would only have 15 minutes on the phone together. I stretched that out to around 22 minutes and I felt pretty guilty doing so, as Tom was chatting to me from a busy banking exhibition somewhere in Europe, clearly being pulled from meeting to call and back to meeting again. Recently, it transpires that Tom has been struggling with the stress caused by his role in recent years. There's a fantastic article in The Guardian today, it's written by their banking correspondent, and Tom Blomfield shares his personal experience on mental health, the impacts of the COVID-19 crisis, and the myth of the superhero tech boss. There's a lot to learn from this article. One of my key messages as a personal finance YouTuber, podcaster and author is to always understand the interplay between income and status wealth and freedom or time and health wealth. Those are the four main types of wealth, and they're all connected, and we always place far too much emphasis on the former, often at the expense of the latter. The article opens by explaining that Tom Blomfield was not prepared for the stress that the COVID-19 crisis would unleash on the banking sector and his own mental health. It describes him, at 35 years old, as already struggling to meet the daily demands of running a digital bank that had grown to nearly 5 million customers and had become a success story for Britain's fintech sector. According to the article, Tom experienced constant worries about investor relations, generating revenue, and critical news coverage. And of course, that's unsurprising to hear. This was a large and a rapidly growing business, and he was ultimately responsible for its growth, for its success. But it's a rare individual who could be pulled in so many different directions for so long without something snapping. Tom told The Guardian, "I was stressed, definitely. I suffered anxiety that impacted my sleep. Did I border on depression at times? I don't know." As a way to tackle these issues, he tried mindfulness apps and he worked with 3 different therapists, but he admits that nothing changed, identifying the core issue as an inability to switch off. There's this stereotype of entrepreneurs as superheroes. We see the hustle culture glorified in the business world, working an incredible number of hours each week, getting up far too early in the morning, rushing from city to city to pack in as many meetings as humanly possible. Blomfield told The Guardian, "There's this myth of the superhero founder who sleeps 4 hours a night and reads 500 books a year and is up hiking before dawn, kind of garbage. If it's true, I've never met that person." I've never met them either. We might see a false presentation of this approach on social media occasionally, but how much of it is really true? I consider myself to be a very hard-working entrepreneur, but I was in bed still at 9 o'clock this morning, for example. The article goes on to explain that Tom stepped down as chief executive of Monzo, becoming part-time president of the bank back in May 2020, and then he left Monzo entirely last week. He said, "The last couple of years, I didn't feel like myself. I felt like it was just about keeping Monzo going." Tom Blomfield isn't the first banking boss to open up about their mental health. The article mentions that former Virgin Money CEO Jane Ann Gardia was candid about postnatal depression and battling suicidal thoughts due to the intense work pressure around the bank's 2014 initial public offering. And former Lloyds Banking Group chief executive Antonio Horta Osorio spoke publicly about the issues when he took temporary leave and checked himself into the Priory for exhaustion and insomnia. That was following the global financial crisis of 2008. Blomfield apparently followed that story closely. He said to The Guardian, "I thought that was a real show of strength." However, he does say that he worries the language that's used to describe mental health issues is too binary. You're either well or you're mentally ill, and being mentally ill sounds, as he says, scary and stigmatized. Tom said that really stops people talking about stress and anxiety and depression, which are just unbelievably common. As I said at the start of the video, wealth can carry a hefty personal price tag. Tom Blomfield's work at Monzo since its launch back in 2015 has made him a very wealthy individual. He's in the Sunday Times Rich List with £100 million worth of wealth, but at what price? Is the lifestyle that Tom describes in this article worth that level of wealth? He said of his daily routine, it would be packed with meetings from pretty much 9 AM till 7 PM, down to the nearest 5 minutes. My time was planned. And of course, that was my experience speaking to Tom towards the end of 2016, with his time being tightly planned by others. Perhaps the most shocking element disclosed in the article was about the red phone kept in his bedroom at nights to alert him of emergencies. He said every couple of months the red phone rings and you know it's going to ruin the rest of your week. No wonder his sleep was being disrupted. Another revelation in the article was the impact of Anne Bowden, his former boss, sharing unflattering stories of Tom's time at rival bank Starling, where he was chief technology officer. The stories included embarrassing dinner parties and investor meetings. Despite being sent drafts of her book in advance of its publication, Tom admits he didn't read them. He says of the book, a lot of what was written was not true, honestly, just factually not true. But he decided not to retaliate publicly for fear of generating even more headlines. The pandemic clearly added to Tom's levels of stress and anxiety. He recounts that revenues at Monzo halved overnight and investors pulled promised funding. He says on the Friday that London went into lockdown, 3 separate funds phoned me up and said, look, this investment's not going ahead. So at the start of the pandemic, he ended up working 7 days a week. He was working with government officials on the various COVID loan schemes and UK regulators on issues of financial resilience for the banking sector. He says there were a few weeks at the start of the crisis when genuinely people didn't know if the financial system was going to collapse or not. Monzo made 66 people redundant following the start of the pandemic, and it furloughed a further 175. It shut its office in Las Vegas, and it secured further funding, which cut its valuation from £2 billion down to £1.2 billion. But Tom was able to let go of the reins. He handed over control to the new chief executive, T.S. Anil, and he was able to let go of the business entirely when he saw the success of this new management team, who were able to beat the pre-pandemic revenue levels and recover entirely for the business. He says, it's definitely the right time for me to move on, and I feel so much lighter now. I'm just enjoying the small things in life. I feel like myself again. Lots of lessons to take away from this very personal interview, very candid interview with Monzo co-founder Tom Blomfield. Please do reflect on that interaction between money and status and freedom or time and health. We don't talk about this stuff enough, especially within the entrepreneur space, where working ridiculously hard is just taken for granted. Let me know what you think of this interview. I'll pop a link in the description. I look forward to hearing from you in the comments as well. And please do smash the like button while you're at it. Liking these videos is the simplest way to help me out as we convince the YouTube algorithm to share my content with a whole new audience, so this channel can continue to grow. Thank you for watching this video. Until next time, I'm Martin Bamford. And remember, when it comes to your money, the more you know, the faster it can grow.